God, it's a bit of an emotional roller coaster, is that? That's tough. That's where you're at.
Well, it's not just to make a podcast out of it. It was for us to be able to document it and reflect on it. Now then, everyone, and welcome to the Wedding Mavericks podcast with Lindsay and Jules, a podcast for wedding videographers and photographers where we discuss all aspects of running a business, developing technical knowledge and skills, and pushing your creativity. The Wedding Mavericks podcast is sponsored by Divine Studios, a creative agency based in Leeds, helping businesses across the globe develop web experiences and brand identities. If you're looking for help with your branding or website, please get in touch with them for a no obligation chat to see how they can help. And if you mention Wedding Mavericks, you'll get a 10% discount on their services. Thanks to Divine for sponsoring the podcast. So, how did we make over £250,000 shooting weddings with no experience? It's one of those titles, isn't it? Like you see on the YouTube videos, and I guess we're doing it on purpose, I suppose, to make clickbait to make you kind of if anyone sees that, to like, oh yeah, that might be worth a listen, because that seems to be what people are bothered about. So to kind of open with the honest sort of description and everything, it's not intended to be a flex. You know, what we're talking about here, this is the amount of revenue that we've generated since we started our business 5 years ago.
Yeah. But it's not the amount of money that we've had in our pocket
after
5 years of business.
We ain't got a $250,000 sat in the bank, let's put it that way. It's the idea of us doing this podcast. It's meant to be an inspirational story about what's achievable. If we've done it, if we've kind of made it to a point where we can live off doing this as a job, then you can do it too. And we're massive advocates for being happy in your work, following your passions and dreams. And this is a story. The story that we're going to tell you today, this is a story about ups and downs of running a successful and sustainable wedding photography and videography business. This isn't on the notes, but just to explain, we're basically coming up to 5 years of being in business. So May 2017 was when we started our business. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to give you a complete insight into that. So to give you the highlights, us starting this was from zero professional experience in wedding photography or videography, as in we'd never done anything to do with that.
Nope.
Zero professional experience in the wedding industry. We'd never worked in the wedding industry.
Nope.
We got married and we went to some weddings.
Yeah. We've been married and we've been guests.
There'd been, the odd...
been a best man.
Been a best man a couple of times. You've been a bridesmaid a few times. Few dives into the chocolate fountain.
That was the CV, wasn't it?
Yeah, plenty of worms on the dance floor. That's our experience in weddings. Usually very drunken photos of me. We've worked in, zero experience of running a business. Mm. So we've worked in other jobs as well as shooting weddings over that time, that 5 years. And we've also spent the last 5 years, most of the time, in full-time education alongside running our business. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like a bit of an interesting story, really, because we've built our business up and it's been what you would describe as a full-time business, but we've also been doing other things, what you would describe as full-time. So we've almost had full-time education, and you've certainly had full-time jobs going on alongside this. So it's kind of, it's an interesting one. We also had a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. So, if you take 18 months out of the equation, this 5 years has actually been 3 to 4 years of actual normal running a business. And that's the story that we want to tell.
Yeah.
Just to kind of come back to it, so the whole 250,000 thing, think about it like this, split it divide it by 5 years, 250,000, that's 50 grand a year. So, if you were thinking about it as a wage each, it's 25 grand. If you think about it as one person's wage, which, because there's other things been going on. So one person's wage, 50 grand a year is good, isn't it? That's a really good wage. And it's crazy, really, when you think about it, because the UK salary is 38 grand a year, the average UK salary, which I'd say most people don't earn. It's just that the average is evened out by the really high earners and then obviously the lower earners, but it's all averaged out. So, if we factor in, the cost of doing business and everything, 50 grand a year from your wedding photography and videography business or videography business is that's great, isn't it? Yeah. But it hasn't been an easy thing. This has been we've worked our absolute asses off, haven't we? Yeah. Self-employment, starting and running your own business is certainly not an easy option, and we don't want to kind of, with a clickbait title like that, and with kind of us sort of saying, we're not going to be telling you it's all a bed of roses. We're basically going to give you warts and all, the whole kind of scenario of what's gone on over the last 5 years, from before starting the business right through to where we are today. So it might not all be done in this episode because it could go on a little bit, but we're trying to give you some solid information and facts and figures as well, so that if you are kind of in that journey, whichever bit of that journey you're in, you can kind of get a gauge of what is possible, or if you're doing better than that, you'll be able to, that'll be a great yardstick for you. Or maybe it's some inspiration if you start in your journey of what's possible if you're willing to work really hard.
Yeah. And you talked about the fact that I'd done something else as well, sort of along the way, and it's only really in the latter part of those 5 years, isn't it? As a result of the pandemic, I would say that I'd gone into teacher training and then got a job teaching for a little bit. So the income that we took from that revenue that had been generated, that wasn't the only income for that entire period of time. But at this stage, our business, it was supporting the whole household.
Well,
wasn't it?
At this point, it is, yeah.
So not much has changed really from when we were kind of in a previous life, if you like, when we were working anything from between, and this will sound a bit crazy, but perhaps anyone that's had some experience of maybe working for emergency services will kind of appreciate when I say both working between kind of 40 to 60 hours a week in those jobs, rarely spending time together, kind of having to work out a shift pattern to manage childcare in and amongst that. So that meant not having time together as a family, which arguably is the single biggest reason of why we had our own reasons for leaving the police previously, but that was a huge factor for both of us. So yeah, not spending that time together, having a bit of a miserable family life, really.
Yeah.
Because of that kind of there being so few opportunities where it would be as a collective, it would be all of us together.
Yeah, if you talk about being a slave to your job and kind of, working, living to work. Yeah, it was more like living to work, wasn't it, rather than working to live. And that's kind of what Lindsay meant by the nothing much has changed. What we mean is nothing much has changed in terms of our lifestyle, as in how we can live. Our income changes has not we've not been affected in terms of we're still earning enough money to have a similar lifestyle to what we had then.
Yeah.
But
I would say we're certainly more careful now.
We're more careful. We're not as frivolous with our spending, but also we don't really. I wouldn't say we're, apart from we haven't been able to go on holiday because of the pandemic and stuff. But we're not in a massively worse financial situation than we were when we were in the police.
Yeah, and earning those wages. Yeah, but just in terms of the sort of how it felt to kind of be doing that. So not much of a kind of family existence, if you like. It'd work out for us where it might be once a month, every sort of few weeks, or if annual leave was booked, that we'd kind of get that time off together. So fast forward to sort of now, the flexibility that we've got, the amount of time that we do spend together is just, it's worlds apart. Really is.
Every day we're together, and with the kids, we take the kids to school, we pick the kids up from school, we have tea together regularly, we have time together on a weekend all the time, school holidays, we use childcare pretty much solidly, whether it was parents or whether it was a nursery or a after school, before school club type thing. That was solid, wasn't it?
It was like wraparound care, yeah. In sort of previous line of work, yeah. So
Whereas we don't have that now.
No. So, and we're talking about that because we're sort of showing the contrast between sort of then and now, and that's definitely like I said, that was perhaps one of the single biggest goals, the single biggest reasons as to why we decided to make a change in what we did for a living, and we wouldn't change that for a second. You often get asked, actually.
Oh, you get asked every time you see someone that you used to know from work and stuff.
Yeah. Do we kind of miss having a stable job, inverted commas, and the having the crack and the banter with people and things like that? And yeah, certainly I miss people that I used to work with, but cracky, what we've just been talking about, no. I wouldn't go back to that. But anyway, we're kind of,
we could reminisce about that all day, couldn't we? We want to give you some information.
Yeah, so kind of so for us, we realise this is not kind of a pertinent point in your careers, but for us, it's our kind of 5th anniversary that's fast approaching. Of us being in business, and so as you said, it might well be interesting just to kind of hear a bit of a different story, maybe relatable for some people listening who might have been on a similar journey, or certainly their own journey if you've transitioned from another career, if you're in that process, or perhaps you've just been self-employed all the way from maybe education, or as from whatever you did before you kind of came into this profession, but actually maybe you're going through a period of change because you're either growing, you're starting to specialise in something else, maybe you're starting to work with new people, or new people have been introduced into your business. So there's a journey there for every one of us. And so, we always encourage, and we love to hear from people anyway. So equally so for this, you're just hearing our kind of story here. But like we say, hopefully it will kind of maybe set something ringing in your mind, or maybe get you to start thinking about, do you know what? Yeah, crack, it's a heck of a journey I've been on to sort of get here. And
because we're all going to have similar stories. They're all going to be a bit different, but we've all been on a massive journey, whether you're just starting out and you're making a jump to come into this, or whether you've, you know, been doing it a few years and you're like, yeah, I used to be a tiler. I don't know why I picked that.
Doesn't matter.
I think I must have just looked over there at the tiles. By the way, if anybody hears a noise going off in the background, it's the hamster. Because kids, we're recording this in the evening, the kids are home, and we're in the dining room and the hamster's going bananas.
He wants to tell you his story. Anyway, yeah. So back on point. Dear me. So yeah, in as much as it's a nice kind of time for the two of us to sort of reflect on what has been, it's a good opportunity actually for us to be really transparent with you, to be really honest about things like, and I know we've talked about pricing and costs and all of the different things like that, but actually, you know, to talk about along the way, what were we charging, what have we been charging, how have we kind of progressed on that journey, the kind of highs and lows, the challenges that we've sort of been through. And I think it's good to do that. It's good for everybody to do that, because there'll certainly be some real pivotal moments for us, and there will have been for you. And the course of our business, like for many of you, took a massive change. And that impacted on the plans that we had for growth and for success at the time, where it felt like we were just, you know, things were full steam ahead and we were really reaching just, you know, fantastic heights, and then things changed. And there's definitely mistakes that we've made, failures along the way, and I think it's good to be honest about those, because yeah, crikey, if you don't learn an awful lot when you're self-employed, I do not know when you would. Yeah. You certainly learn more doing this than you would in a classroom.
Absolutely.
Put it that way. From two people that, like you just said at the beginning, have spent the majority of the past 5 years also in a classroom, re-educating themselves. Yeah. The real life and the practical experience of what we're sort of been through.
Yeah. So we'll just touch on going back to way before anything else, us two growing up. And you might be thinking, why are they talking about that? But just to kind of give the context, we're both from quite sort of poor working class backgrounds. I think the difference for me is, and I will talk about this probably in another episode, because it will be to do with more creative type stuff. But basically, I came from a family that were all quite creative, and I had musicians, quite successful musicians in the family, including my dad, my uncle. A lot of people in my family were quite creative in terms of the arts, music, things like that. So that kind of, you would kind of understand that I had this background that might make me go into a creative thing. But actually, because of the negative experiences that I had of that, and the negative experiences that my family had of that, I was kind of pushed not to do creative stuff. And although there might have been some, and I will talk about this another time, but some success in terms of like music and arts and stuff in our family, it didn't necessarily lead to success financially. So I did grow up, my mum was a single parent, I grew up with my mum, and we didn't have a lot of money. And Lindsay, you had a similar setup, didn't you? Yeah. So, you know, I was steered away from doing anything creative by my family because it wasn't looked upon as a good option. And I think for both of us, growing up, we had very little. We didn't have what all the other kids had. And so we wanted to make sure we got a job. we've talked about this obviously between us, that we probably wanted to get jobs that meant we had decent income and they were quite secure. You know, they were safe jobs. We weren't going to be dreamers, and we kind of that's the route we went down. And somehow that took us both to joining the police in our early 20s, or you were 19, I think.
Yeah. Just turned 20 when I started. Yeah.
So, you know, bizarre, because honestly, my everyone in my family is like, we were like really confused when you joined police. We never thought that was, and I think everybody that knows me, like my friends, I mean, I think if Lindsay sort of was honest and she was like, I just, now I know you, I don't know, don't really understand why you joined the police, because I haven't got that personality at all. If anything, I'm the total opposite. I'm quite a rebellious person. Very not much for the strictness and all that. So, yeah, but I did, and I'm glad I did, because me and Lindsay met. We met at work. We were both on the same team. We ended up working together as like permanent partners. This was after we'd actually got together. That's a great story. And yeah, we fell in love, didn't we? And very quickly we got married. So within, you know, what was it? The same year we got together, I proposed to you. Mm-hmm. And then we moved in together the next year, and then the year after we got married. So, it might sound like a bit of a recipe for disaster, but you know, it's our 15th wedding anniversary this year, so something's obviously worked out for us. And we're doing a podcast together, for God's sake. So over the next decade, we lived holidays, life experience. We had 2 kids, moved house a couple of times. It wasn't till like 2016, so almost like a decade later. And between us, we had like, you know, sort of 20 to 30 years joint, you know, between us servicing the police. We kind of knew things were changing for us, didn't we? And we were like, we don't see this being the thing forever. And there's a lot of reasons for this, and too many to go into now. And generally it was like, we were fed up with it, and that different stuff happened to us both in the jobs, you know, like internal politics, like personal issues that kind of made us reassess what we were doing, our personal circumstances. Like, I think having kids, you know, in that job, when we were sort of younger, when we were single, or when we were just the two of us, you know, it was great fun. As soon as you have kids and you're doing a job where it's relatively dangerous and very unsociable, you just reassess everything. And so 2016, I'm talking to my brother who's just finished his media. He's a lot younger than me. He's just finished his media degree, and we're talking about what we can do, because he doesn't know what he's going to do with his life. And it just, you know, it was between stuff. And we talked about doing wedding videography, and I had no experience in wedding videography, neither did he, but he kind of thought he knew cameras, and I kind of wanted to do something that was creative and involving video. And there's a lot of I could tell you the full story, but in a nutshell, he ended up getting a job working for BMW selling cars, and he's in his early 20s, so what are you going to do when someone offers you a BMW and some decent money to sell cars? He's going to go do that. And at this point, I've already, you know, used some of our savings to...
What?
Yikes. I've already used some of our savings to buy like a bit of camera equipment, you know, nothing crazy. And I've lined up a first free wedding. And this is just like a random, you know, Facebook post, and a friend's sister was getting married. And it just so happened it was at a decent place in the Lake District. It was going to look all right. And I didn't have a clue, did I? But I'd watched a load of wedding film school stuff, and I'd been reading all sorts and watching stuff, and a bit of Matt Johnson, he'd just come on the scene doing a bit of stuff. And yeah, I basically was like, right, I'm going to go film this wedding. And I'd got myself all kitted up and, yeah, absolutely zero formal training in video production or photography. I'd never second shot for anyone. I wouldn't recommend this for anyone. What I'm telling you, this is not the way to do it. Like I wouldn't suggest to anybody you just go and shoot a wedding without second shooting or anything like that. It's not a good idea. But I just want to be honest about how kind of it worked out for us, how we did it. And I went and shot this first wedding, and it went okay. And I remember putting all sorts of effort into this, like, you know, I'd really watched a lot of stuff and I was trying to use techniques that I had no idea. I'd no proper idea. I'd just watched all this YouTube stuff. And, yeah, it turned out all right because we were on this pontoon jetty thing on Lake Ulverston and like, just this, I remember just this epic shot and I was just like, whoa. And from that point, I think I was hooked on wanting to get into weddings because I was just like, I've just done that. And, looking back on it, it's, like everybody does with their first wedding. But it was exciting. And, so I remember taking ages editing that. And I think I was editing it on like a trial version of Final Cut and didn't know what I was doing. And
like learning to use that as well.
Yeah, I'd never used that. I'd used a bit of iMovie and I'd used a bit of Windows Media Player and things like that, Windows Media Movie Maker. And so I just kind of literally just played. I didn't have a clue. I didn't have any training. I didn't go on any courses. I didn't even really watch anything about editing. I just made that up as I went along. And I remember making this box. I got do you remember I bought all this crap and I made this box and I put this little bottle of champagne in it and sent it to the couple with this USB stick. Anyway, just the stuff that you did. And it was pretty amazing. And I was hooked. And this is in September time, I think, 2017. And, it was not a great time for me. There was a lot of stuff going on. So it's quite, looking back on it, it's quite a crazy thing that happened at the same time as a lot of other bad stuff was happening. And anyway, I somehow kind of caught the attention of my mate who was getting married a few months later. And I said to him, do you want me to make you a wedding video? Like, look at this one. And he was like, well, I don't know, mate. Why do you... And I showed him what I'd done for this other one. And they were like, oh, yeah, we'll have that. And we did it, didn't we? So because me and Lindsay were already guests, we just went and shot it together. At this point, we bought another camera and everything and tried to do one better, didn't we? And I bought a drone, bought a Phantom 3, DJI Phantom 3. Rest in peace.
I'm glad you said it.
That drone died shortly after, but it did enough to do a decent job at that wedding. It didn't make it much further, but that's all part of the learning curve, isn't it? So, there were some drone shots in it, and this might sound a bit crazy. If anybody who's making wedding videos now, it might sound a bit crazy because everyone just gets a drone, don't they? And all that sort of thing. But at this point, this is 5 years ago, so drones were really, really new. Like, it was the point where if people saw drone footage 5 years ago, they were like, whoa, did you have a helicopter at your wedding? So it was pretty big deal. And we shot that wedding, and it was kind of like, that wedding was on our portfolio for ages, wasn't it? Yeah. It was a nice wedding. And I think we did okay. Obviously, it's still only our second ever job, and we've got no idea what the fuck we're doing. But, you know, it was... so after that one, we thought we'd do it together, but we didn't really have this solid plan, did we? And we got this basic setup with a basic website through Wix and a business name. And we knew we could start charging, or we wanted to start charging, but that's, you know, at the time, the bit of info that was missing was like, how do you charge? What do you charge? Because there wasn't any information business-wise. There was plenty of information on how to, you know, use a camera and stuff like that.
The technical side.
But nothing to do with business. So because we had no real business knowledge or had anyone to advise us, it was just kind of making it up. And I remember we went to a friend's house for their little girl's first birthday party, I think it was. So like, it was my best mate. We went to their house, and my best mate's wife's sister was getting married, and basically said, "Oh, we want you to do our wedding video. How much?" And it was one of the... I remember being in the kitchen and being so awkward about it. It was like, I don't know, like, what about 500 quid? And like thinking, that's like, I'm taking a piss here. Like, they're not going to go for this. And she was like, all right, yeah, okay. And so that was it, wasn't it?
That was it.
That was our first.
And then a few minutes came through to me saying, She
just said, yeah.
£500. And we had to have a minute, didn't we? Thinking, what?
Why?
What for?
Yeah. And then that was, you know, it was only a few months to their wedding. It was like 2 or 3 months, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So that was our first ever wedding video that we got paid for. We got paid 500 quid. And then from there, you know, this is kind of May 2017. So before we shot that wedding, that's when we decided to officially set up the business, because we were actually going to take some money for this. And because we're goody two-shoes, we didn't want to like not have things straight with the tax man. So we were like, right, we'll set the business up properly before that wedding in May. And then, yeah, it just kind of, I remember getting there that day. I remember getting there at 5 a.m. And I took my sister as a second shooter. So I got to the place over towards Manchester, Cheshire area at 5 a.m.
And why did you go at 5 a.m?
Well, because
you wanted to get a sunrise.
So I wanted to get sunrise shots at the church. I mean, what the freaking hell was I thinking? Oh, that's real. Honestly, spent about 2 hours filming this church. I mean, what a waste of time. But this is what you do, man, when you don't know what you're doing.
That 2.5, 3 seconds in the film, it looks so good.
Does it look good? I'll have to watch that back. I don't remember thinking it was worth it. And I also thought, oh yeah, I'll try and fly my drone. I didn't realise that it was at the end of the airport runway for Manchester.
That quiet little airport.
So that wasn't going to happen, was it? And if anybody is listening, this is basically a mobile. So this is like, it literally is, the planes come over the church at drone height. So no, you can't fly your drone there, mate. So anyway, I then drove back into Manchester because my sister was at uni in Manchester. She's studying post-production in film, so she's going to help me film this wedding, and I go and pick her up, and I have this most ridiculously long day because I've kind of got there at 5 a.m. and I don't leave until like 10, 11 o'clock at night or whatever. And yeah, that one goes okay. It was all right.
It was a lovely film.
Yeah, and then like it just kind of cascaded from there. And the one where it kind of, the next sort of, I think it was the next one or maybe 2 more later, that I got this one, and I was at a place on the coast at Whitby, and I got it because it's someone I went to school with who kind of they had an issue at the last minute with their videographer, and so I ended up getting asked if I could do it. And again, it was a £500-600 effort, but it was just such a beautiful location, and it was such a beautiful, and we've done so many films there, haven't we? Because we've we've managed to use that in the SEO. So this is one of those things, like early on, we've done one film and we charged £500-600 for it, but it was like that made that we've now done 7 or 8, weddings at that location just because we did that film. That was one of the first films we ever did. So when we've talked about this in the past, that's another reason why stuff comes of what you do without you even realizing it, just from SEO and getting on the books of the hotel, so that they're kind of putting you in their brochure. We're always getting inquiries from them from that brochure, and that's from that initial film, which we didn't really know what we were doing. And on that shoot, I met a photographer called Kieran, who I've stayed mates with, and we throw each other stuff all the time now, and I've done for the last sort of 4 years. So it's it just shows kind of those we've talked about the relationships and everything that you build, but that wedding was so important, and from a portfolio perspective as well, it kind of was it was big. That one stayed on the portfolio a long time. It was very different as well to a lot of the stuff that you would see at the time. There's some crazy shots in there, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I was just like basically dangling a gimbal in the grass. And this is like, really early days of gimbals as well. So I guess rambling on a bit, but I'm telling you this because it was kind of just, I did not know what I was doing at all. But the results that came from it, even though they wouldn't be that impressive now, because there's so much for people to look at and education and understand now, but at the time there wasn't, and I was just experimenting, and all this stuff came out of this experiment.
Yeah, and I would say for me, just hearing you go back over them, don't ever underestimate the impact that an image or a few seconds of a film that you make can have over time. Because from the ones that you've spoken about, from that very first one, the walking on the pontoon, to Jane and Tom and the images of them, the footage of them on the dance floor together, to this from Lucy and Colin, like you said, it's that image of them sort of through that really long, the overgrown grass.
Still some of my favourite shots, even though they're not perfect.
And Wilf's wedding, his speech. Yeah. It's the snippets. It can be a single image or a small number of images, like we say. And those things are 5 years ago, and still today, people will refer back to those things. So, like you were just saying, reinforcing that is the relationships you build. It's the level of customer service that we talked about last week. It's all these little things along the way. It's like this trail that you leave almost.
It is a trail. It's the trail.
It's the little breadcrumbs
that
you leave. So, yeah, please don't sort of underestimate that even. And in an industry like ours, 5 years ago, the way you're kind of talking about sort of the use of some of the tools that and the equipment that you used seems so long ago in some respects, but cracky, how quickly is that 5 years gone?
It's gone crazy, but at the time as well, not everyone, gimbals were new, drones were new, and it's not just because I was using these pieces of equipment. It's just that I think the best thing that the thing that worked for us is at this point had no, you talk about photography principles and filmmaking principles. I didn't understand any of them properly.
And you had nothing to lose.
And I had nothing to lose. I was just experimenting. So when we talk about zero experience, fucking clueless is basically the best way of describing it. But had some really quite impactful results because I feel like then I was actually doing stuff better than we're doing it now, because we're so conscious now, we're so intentional now, whereas then it was like, well, if I just try this, maybe it'll look okay, and then it's like, whoa, that looks pretty good. Do you remember like looking back, and I was like, come look at this footage, Linz. I don't know how I've done it, but like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I remember Kieran actually commenting on that film. He's there with me. He's doing the photos, and he's even said since, you know, like I was just so surprised. I just saw you fucking about with this gimbal, and like, you know, he thought, because I said to him, oh, this is like my second, third wedding or whatever. And he was like, I just thought this is going to be shit. And like, you know, but it just shows if you're not held back by this, you know, I've got to do this way because this is really important, and this is the principle, and this is how things are done, and I understand how to make a film, I understand how to take a photograph. Just forget all that shit, because I felt it was so liberating back then. And I feel like I need to go back to it. But anyway, that's tangent as usual. So you talked about then the first few, and then so we're on 2017 still. It's going to be a long one. And so on the back of then, so the ones that you've spoken about, kind of Facebook was the marketing tool of choice back then, wasn't it? And so, but the use of that kind of, for us, that was an easy way for people that we were, you know, friends with, had existing relationships with, from the career that we'd just left, our school friends, or other connections, that sort of thing. An easy way for people to see what we were up to. And so then kind of word of mouth referrals and things like that was a big help for us. But not kind of charging much for what we were producing was pretty good for people, I would say. And what we were doing was something that was different, and it was something that, it was not something that people were used to seeing at the time. No.
Because, you know, even until I saw you starting to create these films and put them together, I'd be thinking about our wedding film.
Yeah, which is very different.
Back in 2007, which, crikey, if we think a lot's changed in 5 years, go back 15 years, you know, it seems so old-fashioned now. Ours look really old-fashioned, doesn't it?
Yeah.
There was no creative edits then, no social media, teaser trailers, no reels.
Well, there was a highlight. There was a highlight edit, which was
there?
Yeah, it was to Snow Patrol's chasing cars.
Oh yeah, I knew that.
But you know, it wasn't the same as what people are making now.
And so it was kind of because we were doing something that looked a little bit different. Our kind of existing friendship network and things like that, because people could sort of see, and we were making good use of Facebook at that point just by simply sharing things, because of course it wasn't the kind of...
Yeah, you were getting decent organic reach.
Yeah. So it was kind of around about this time as well where sort of last minute jobs were starting to crop up, and lots of sort of referrals and word of mouth, like we said, and that was something that we talked about last week and sort of the week, and I know we've mentioned previously about the kind of the importance of that, and like we were only just saying a few minutes ago, don't underestimate kind of the things that you are doing, even if it is early on in your career, whether that's photo or the film. Don't underestimate that, but with it as well, you know, make sure, please, that you are considering those other aspects of the wedding day as well, in terms of your demeanour, your behaviour, your professionalism and the standard of customer service that you're giving, because just like we said last week, there are things that were happening round about this time and over the course of the next, I know you're going to talk about the next months and sort of year, that are still having an influence on the work that we're getting the opportunity to do today.
Absolutely. Yep. So, you know, this is 2017, it's our first year, and basically, because we want you to understand just how much we were charging, because that's relevant, people need to know, you know, what progression we had in pricing, what progression we had in inquiries, what progression we had in the number of jobs we were doing. Because if you're wanting to take your business, you know, if you're kind of just starting out and you're wanting to go full time into it, or you're doing something else alongside and you're wanting to jump to full time, you really do need to know just kind of what a typical kind of progression is, and you need to know the numbers, you need to know the facts, and what we will say is we didn't necessarily get it right, and we can kind of retrospectively look back and say what we should have done and what you should probably do if you're kind of where we were then. But we was charging 2017. We're charging 500 to 1,000 quid, and by the end of 2017 and going into 2018, we were charging between 1,000 and 1,500. So, like, that's where we were pricing wise, you know. But by kind of mid 2018. The jobs that we were doing then were at 1,500 quid. We weren't doing, unless we booked them really early on, we weren't doing any that were a lot less than that. But it did take time to get to there. As in, you know, it wasn't one day two where we went, right, we've booked a couple for 500 quid, now we're going to go up. And I think retrospectively we would have done that. So we didn't start using a CRM till back into 2017, and that's basically because, again, back then they didn't really exist. It was very new stuff, was CRMs. So we don't really have accurate figures to share with you in terms of like the number of jobs and leads and things like that. But what we would say is our inquiries were probably less than 5 a month. We were booking most of them, and our revenue for that year was definitely not enough. In 2017, it was nothing really. It was enough to buy some equipment with and invest in the business in that way. But we certainly couldn't have lived off it. So we've kind of come off. We came off the topic because we started talking about how we got into this. But if we go back to September 2017, I leave the police. And both of us go to university. So we basically decided that if we were going to both move on from the police and do other careers, we didn't really know if this wedding videography and photography thing would work out. That was just kind of a, let's see what happens. But we felt like we needed a plan B, didn't we? So both of us were going to do a business-related degree. And then at the last minute, I kind of got talked into by it. When I went on an interview to a college, university college, and they talked me into doing media and photography. So I didn't end up doing business, and Lindsay ended up doing business. So Lindsay starts a business degree, I start a media and photography degree, and Lindsay's still working full-time in the police, and I'm a student / business owner. And you're a student as too. So we had Lindsay's income, bit of student finance money, and that's kind of helping us pay the bills. And until this point, we've just been shooting video weddings. And I thought, I'll do some free family shoots, because if I want to get into the photography side of things, I need to get some experience and I need to have some photos to show. But no one's going to let me loose on their wedding. And I didn't really, for some reason, I hadn't thought of the whole second shooting thing. So I thought, I'll just put a post out on Facebook and say, does anyone want some photos taken of the kids and stuff like that as a family? And I ended up doing like about 10 shoots for Note. Got some photos, like did some horrendous edits, Really did learn a lot about photography in that space of time. And then just after Christmas 2017, we're studying, Lindsay's working, we're doing weddings, like video weddings, probably like 2 or 3 a month. And we did our first photo wedding. And this was just after Christmas 2017, and we did that for free, didn't we?
Yeah.
And it might seem crazy, you know, like, because we'd been charging for video for quite a while at this point. But for me, if you don't know what you're doing and you've never done it before, I'd always do it for free. You know, that first time, just to basically give yourself this opportunity to not have the pressure to deliver something and just, like, see what happens. So that's what we did. And it went okay. We got some decent images from it, didn't we? It was a really good experience. And it helped us basically to add photography into the packages, you know, without really having any experience whatsoever in doing wedding photography, which sounds mental, and I wouldn't recommend this to anybody. But I think because we felt like we understood a wedding day and we could do a decent wedding video, we felt like we could probably do a decent job with the photos. And that photo job was our audition and our experiment, if you like. You know, they weren't expecting anything because they weren't going to have a photographer anyway. And actually what we did was probably better than what most, you know, paid photographers at the lower price point would have given them. So I think, it was quite creative for what it was.
For I think because with the kind of the eye you're looking through, if you like, you know, your creative kind of mindset and the experience of already starting to produce the films and create the films, it wasn't like it was we'd done nothing else beforehand. We didn't have an insight into what a wedding day was, like you say. We didn't understand, you know, what makes brides comfortable, uncomfortable in prep, what grooms comfortable, uncomfortable with, what works in group shots, you know.
We'd seen already.
We'd kind of seen it, and I think as well, because, you know, you talked about Kieran but there's, you know, other photographers as well, having had the opportunity to work alongside other photographers and sort of see how they work and how they are with people, and kind of what their, you know, what they make sure are their sort of priorities on the day, and just sort of the way that they work, you know, had been fantastic for us. So, you know, that's important to highlight as well, because it wasn't, you know, I know it's Wedding Mavericks, but it wasn't, you know.
Oh, we're Mavericks, all right.
Turn up with no previous knowledge, or you know, we're very much in the same respect that we're saying we did one for free and then decided to be able to offer that. There was a lot of work behind the scenes, and there was a lot of observing of peers within the industry because of the films that we've been able to make as well. And so, you know, really that's a credit to them. Yeah. The people that would work
because
for,
we'd learned a lot from people.
And just, you know, naturally I say it's a credit to them, because the conversations that you know you'll have if you're a photographer and you work with a videographer, and vice versa, when you turn up on a wedding day, you'll chew the cud over the day itself, other weddings that you've been doing, but you get technical at one point, don't you? And you start talking about, you know, what's good or what's not, or what do you use, and what's your equipment, what software you're using. It ends up inevitably going into that sort of thing. And I think because there's or certainly what we have experienced, and touch wood it continues, what we've experienced is nothing but kind of, you know, kindness and this sort of openness to people wanting to help one another out.
90%.
So, yeah.
The odd one.
So there's the other one, yeah. But, you know, just a willingness to kind of share knowledge, share experience. And so That's a right long disclaimer, that,
it
isn't
is,
it? That
but
adds into
it's,
it. But I think
it's by
it's
no
important
means,
to
it's by no means
to just
though,
add that as well, and you know, make
yeah, definitely.
make
But
that
Lindsay,
clear.
like this is what I've always said to you. I don't think, I personally wouldn't. I know we would not ever do something that we were not 100% confident that we would be able to do a good job. And, you know, that's not arrogance or ego or whatever. It is a case of don't want to let someone down.
Yeah.
So we'd never enter into something where we thought we were going to let someone down. That's the important part. You know, you should never do something on a whim. You should never do something where you haven't thought it all through.
No.
But it's just that sometimes you've got to take a massive fucking jump. You've got a leap of faith, because there's so much kind of you know, imposter syndrome and an anxiety that you'll feel in doing this.
Yeah.
That you've got to kind of sometimes just put that aside and say, I'm good to go. I'll make this work. And that could be, you might have shot 50 weddings as a second shooter before you feel comfortable doing that, or it might be that, you know, you've done something like what we've just described, which I wouldn't recommend that to everybody. That's just, for me personally, that's kind of my personality, and I feel like you just trusted me and you went along with it, and you smashed it out of the park.
That's very kind. Anyway, segue into, you just got to take the leap. You just got to try something. Let's move on to 2018. So this month is 5 years for the business, but this month, I say into May, mid-May, is 4 years for me for leaving the police. So at that point, you'd set up the business, had been running it, but I'd still been working for that year. And then at that point, there was voluntary redundancy that was offered in the police. Applied for it, not expecting to get it. It was a bit of a long shot, but, you know, I think it was...
It never happened before, as far as we're aware. That was the first time that the police service, well, the particular police service we worked for, had ever offered voluntary redundancy. All the crazy austerity cuts had caused them to do something a bit daft, really. Losing hugely experienced officers and paying them money to leave. Crazy. But they'll probably never do it again.
No. But just, you know, what a gift for us. So it meant that financially there was this injection of cash that we could invest into the business.
That disappears. We'll explain that later.
Yeah, really quickly. But we were together in the business from kind of 4 years ago, and that was it. All the eggs were in that basket, wasn't it, so to speak. So I think it's worth saying that you had left the previous September. I had intended to leave, if not before the end of when I completed my degree, it would have been after that. That was part of my kind of exit strategy, if you like. But then that kind of gift horse came along, and so took that, and that worked out for us. You know, sort of reflecting on that, thinking back on that, it kind of, because all those eggs were in one basket, it bloody had to work.
It did.
We had, you know, we had a young family, household to sustain, you know, cars on the driveway and all the rest of it. You know, we'd been certainly living to our means, had become to a certain level of income within the household. And here we were taking the leap.
Yeah, and this was a huge leap, wasn't it? I suppose we did have a little bit of a safety net because of the voluntary redundancy payment, but it wasn't by any means just gonna. That wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't totally. It was like we had to do it quick. We had to make it work quick. Yeah,
we did, because that money wasn't going to last forever.
No.
And the plan for it anyway was not take the voluntary redundancy and then have a year off, Lindsay.
Yeah.
We were doing it, you know, for several years, for several reasons, but it was because we'd got bookings for 2018 and into 19. We had a business that was beginning it had legs in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it needed to work, yeah.
Yeah. We had to make it work. So by the end of like the first year of trading in mid 2018, our price is like 1,500 quid. And what we're giving everyone like a creative edit, which I think was 7 minutes, around 7 minutes, and a doc edit. So we're giving them everything pretty much that you can give. Well, there's obviously always stuff you can give from a videographer perspective. We're doing some photography jobs, the occasional like on its own photography job. And I think in 2018 we did sort of like less than half a dozen photo and video jobs. But I do remember doing the first photo and video job fairly early on in 2018. Because I remember that because it was a big deal. Like, crikey, we're doing photo and video together. We've only been doing this a year, pretty much. And we're doing a photo and video together job. And again, it went okay. So, and this is kind of the theme, isn't it? Hopefully not now. We do know definitely what we're doing now, but
certainly not.
But we were definitely.
Hopefully this will go okay.
Yeah, we were definitely jumping at the deep end back then. Reflecting on pricing, if there was one thing we could change, it would be. I think I've already alluded to it, but it'd be we would put our prices up a lot quicker. You know, if you 500 quid.
Then, sorry, so explain that because we're saying in the one hand, aren't we? We kind of there was work in the background, but see how this works out, sort of thing, chancing it. So then, why do you say would we?
Because
up sooner.
Because you book a wedding usually a year, maybe 2 years or more in advance sometimes, and your skill level changes so quickly. And your business changes so quickly that if you've gone and booked a boatload of 500 quid jobs for 18 months, 2 years time, by the time that comes around, especially, not necessarily like, whatever your price is now, 5 years in, you might, make some roads over the next few years. But certainly, if you're charging like a few hundred quid a day, 6 months later, you're 100% shouldn't be charging that. But if you've booked your wedding a year or two in advance and you've done it for 500 quid, you're stuck, aren't you? You're committed to doing that. And that is like one of the biggest stunts to the growth of your business. You can't change it. You can't go to the couple and say, well, actually, it's going to cost you 2 or 3 times as much because my prices have gone up. So you're stuck with doing it. And you don't realise just how that's going to impact you when you first start out. And you might not have the confidence to raise your prices, but if you don't, it's going to be the thing that really stunts your growth of the business. So we're not talking about drastically raising them, but just making sure you are thinking ahead. And in reality, £1,500 for either photography or videography is kind of the, I would say, minimum you should be charging as a kind of basic, I'm good. I'm not talking about I've just started, I've never shot a wedding before, but if you've got a portfolio, if you've shot 5 to 10 weddings and you've got a portfolio to show people, 1,500 quid should just be the standard that should be the starting point. And this is basically based on figures, economics, running a sustainable business, making sure that you can deliver. I'm not telling you that there aren't markets where people are expecting to pay less. Of course there are. And if that's where you want to be, that's absolutely fine. And if you're going to be happy shooting registry officers and local pubs and things like that, that's fine. But if you want to be shooting weddings that are really going to fulfill you and they're really going to move you on in your career, yeah, that's the sort of price to kind of be aiming for as a starting point. So we're around 2018 now.
Yeah. So we know that we can offer video, and now we're offering photography as well as part of packages, and we are thinking about the future. We're thinking about growth for the business, and so we knew it would absolutely, yeah. So we're thinking that actually that's going to be key in terms of strategy to be able to get us to grow, and looking at the longevity of things. We knew that was key for us in order for us to be able to grow it, to expand. But I was struggling a little bit with the kind of working from home. So this was, before, I was ahead of my time. I think, so I was a very naive 19, 20-year-old when I joined the police, and I left when I was 36, and so I feel like I grew up within a very structured, regimented, in a lot of ways, massive organisation.
You were used to being told what to do, weren't you?
Yeah. I was used to responding to things that had occurred, complex investigations with things, but something had happened, and then it was my job to pick up the pieces and then deal with that and get the authority for X, Y, and Z where I needed to. And there was a workload with that, and I had responsibility for that. So even though that carried a great amount of responsibility, it's totally different to being self-employed.
Yeah, definitely.
And like I say, I can't believe I got in at the age I did. But, I'm
sure you'll fall sometime.
I became a grown-up within that organisation. And so when that wasn't there, I kind of felt a bit lost in a way, because working from home meant there wasn't a place of work to go to, and there was no structure to it.
Yeah.
The structure of my day was, in the first instance, focused around the girls, what they needed, where they needed to be, and then that was it. Then it was kind of like, oh, well, I don't really know what I'm supposed to do now. Oh yeah, there's a bit of editing to do, but I can only do that for so long, because then I need to go and pick the girls up, and then that's it, and then I'll get home with him, and there's tea, and there's all the rest of it, and I just couldn't get my head around it for so long. I couldn't, you were busting your ass from the moment we woke up in the morning till when you went to bed, and for me it was just, plus we were studying, so it was almost like I was there was the girl, there was kind of running, maintaining the house, and then there was the studying, and I just couldn't, without that structure, without a place of work to go to.
You hadn't been told that you had to do something. You didn't have someone checking up on you. Like, you didn't have, I wasn't going to you, have you done this, have you done that? Yeah. I was, because that's just not the way our relationships work, and I was just kind of, this is kind of what if you want to do this, that'd be great. And it didn't really work for you, did it?
No. I just felt like I needed I needed some separation between home life and work life, and the kind of the underlying thing with it was work needed to be somewhere else. because home is home, and there's too much going on here, and there's too many distractions then for me in the home environment. And so if you want me to be able to focus, and I need to be focused for this because we need to make this work, then there has to be a place to go to. And so I
was fine on the sofa with my laptop.
Still are.
Still am.
Yeah, so, because you just always do the right thing by people anyway, and you wanted to make this work for me, so you were actively looking for a studio space, and we found somewhere, but it wasn't ideal because as a couple that seem to like to go after a bit of a challenge and not just choose the easy route for something,
and just take
really
too much
don't know
on.
why. In addition to trying to grow a business, it being the household income, our girls studying full-time degrees, we thought we'd take on a studio space that needed a full renovation.
I think we, when we first looked at it, Liz, I think we were looking at it going, oh, this is like a nice space. And then
we could do this, and we could do this, and we could do this.
Somehow down the line that turned into like, let's put a false ceiling in, let's do the whole electrics, let's completely plasterboard the whole wall and redecorate it all and turn it into goodness knows what.
Yeah, I mean, it looked incredible. When it was eventually done, it looked fantastic. And I loved going there and really was proud of it. It looked the bee's knees. But...
Cat's pyjamas? Just because you use the bee's knees.
But would we do it again? Would we, looking back, should we have done that rather? No. Huge mistake.
Yeah.
Huge mistake. Where did Lindsay's redundancy money go? Was it the ceiling? Or was it the floors? Yeah. So it was, did it for the right reasons. And like I say, it looked fantastic, and it was multifunctional, easy for me to say, wasn't it? And it was terrific. And I know you've done some images of this. You've made a short video of this that's available on the YouTube channel. But it was a mistake for us, sadly. And we'll come back to the studio space, and its kind of relevance in this story in a little while on this particular episode. But 2018 in its own right was very busy for us. 30 weddings, over 30,000 in terms of revenue. Yeah,
which at the time I think that was that felt like a huge thing. Felt
amazing,
didn't it? We're only in the second year.
We're all, definitely, yeah.
So.
Yeah, and a few last minute bookings, but a lot kind of booked in advance from what they'd seen of 2017 and the things that have been done there. So fantastic, but still thinking this is for all four of us. Now this is the whole household income. So do you know what? Stepping away from the salaries that we were both earning, if this is going to be it, it's not going to be enough. It's in no way going to make this business sustainable for us if we're going to do it full time. So 2019, we're looking towards there.
And obviously the studio space wasn't just a place to work, it was going to be the catalyst to earning generating more revenue. We obviously, even though we're only in the second, going into the third year, because of what we've talked about already, we had to basically, when you work in the police, a police officer who's been working in the police for more than 10 years is on, I don't even know what it'd be now, but back then it was like late 30s. I'd got promoted, so I was in like the 40s. £1,000 a year. So we had to basically replace those two wages somehow, roughly doing this, which, 80 grand a year is a difficult number to get to very quickly for anybody. And that's what we were basically targeting by the time we'd finished studying. So moved into 2019, it felt like it was a really good year, nearly doubling the revenue, shooting over 40 weddings. This was the first year we did like a larger volume of photography and video jobs together. We I would say at this point we're a third photo and video, pretty much 2/3 video on its own, with a couple of photography jobs here and there. And the thing is, you've got to think, just to talk about photo and video, we're going to talk about that in other episodes in the future, but photo and video, right, you essentially got two jobs in one there. So if you do 10 photo and video jobs, you essentially got 20 jobs worth of work, because we all know that the wedding day is one thing, but most of the work comes in the edit. And so you've got two lots of edits. So essentially 10 jobs turns into 20 jobs, or, at least 15 to 20 jobs. So it's doubling the editing work. The problem was, this is the part where we started to realise that we were trying to juggle too much. We've got the kids and we've got uni. We're doing these degree courses that is usually reserved for a 20, 21-year-old who doesn't have any responsibilities like kids or a business. And we're also like trying to look after elderly relatives. We've got this studio space that we're trying to renovate. It was just mental, wasn't it? Yeah. On the third year in 2019, everything looks like it's going amazingly, but we were really struggling to keep up. And like both of us are feeling burnt out. We're not knowing really how to keep all the plates spinning. There wasn't any time for ourselves. Health and well-being's totally gone out the window. It's not a priority. And we are literally flying by the seat of his pants. Honestly, we were so close to falling apart at times. And we were traveling, we were driving up and down the country, doing jobs all over the place. And we're going to uni. Both of us are going to uni a couple of days a week, in and amongst all the editing. Then we've got the kids. I mean, honestly, looking back at it, it's mental. I can't even believe how it all went. And I just remember we were going on holiday. We booked a holiday. We were going to Corfu. It was October 2019. We've had the craziest summer. And my grandma got ill, and we had uni work to hand in, and the edits had piled up, and I didn't end up going, did I? Like, I did go out, I did fly out after, but only when I'd made sure that I'd tried to make sure my grandma was going to be okay. And I'd pretty much said goodbye to her, because I didn't know I didn't know what would happen over the next weeks, and I didn't know when it had happened. And I had to hand in a piece of work before it was just a crazy time on it. It's really, I can't even believe what we were managing at the time. And I'd say that period from then till like into the early part of 2020 was probably the most difficult 6 months we've ever experienced. And we've had some really stressful situations to deal with in the past, and periods of our life personally and through work, through our previous job. But that, I feel like, was some of the biggest pressure we'd ever felt, wasn't it? Yeah. But we kept it together somehow, and from a perspective going forward, we really started to get the couples that we were looking for in that period of time. We were developing real direction for the brand, for the business. This is like through that 2019 period. We finished renovating the studio early 2020. and it was ready for opening. And it was at this point we decided to form a limited company and help us expand, because we wanted to go more into the commercial side of work. We needed to formalise the sort of pay structure and how we were paying the taxes. And we employed my mum because we knew we were wanting to expand, and we kind of thought she would help with the admin and some editing, and there's a whole backstory to that. But and at that point we really did, because things were growing fast and we were so busy, and we needed to grow more. We were anticipating hiring people in the coming sort of 12 months to keep growing.
Yeah, because 2020 was looking like it was going to be, it was so exciting, looking forward to that, because some really exciting jobs that were on the horizon. Like you've said, we were kind of looking to kind of develop our own skill set and have sort of different aspects of the business, because weddings in some respects they're quite seasonal, aren't they? And so we were thinking, okay, rather than there being this middle cluster of the year where you absolutely run yourself into the ground, but then kind of either side of that almost you're not really as busy, how do we make that balance out throughout the year? How do we try to kind of balance that? And so the kind of thinking was, well, in the future, what we need to do is get to a place where we have a sufficient amount of work at the start and the end of the year, let's just say, and then in that kind of middle proportion of the year for the weddings, there will be fewer of those, and we can be a bit more selective about how many we take on, because we'll have more of a consistent stream of work, albeit it's dealing with a different client type or different sort of industry. But we wanted to get to a point, that was the kind of aspiration, wasn't it? Get to a point where there was something that kind of flowed a lot more through the year, rather than
just diversifying where it all came from.
So we were at a point then, 2020, some awesome jobs that were lined up for then.
I was really excited, weren't we, about the summer?
Really excited. We'd got to 3 years at this point. We'd now got our own studio. It looks really good. I'm not going to use the phrase that you used. And kind of the foundations were there to build something that was bigger than where we currently were. We were looking to the future. And then